Hey, welcome to Afikra's Movie Night podcast, Kawalis. We are revamping this series, and we're starting off with a really special episode with Mohamed Kordofani, who is the writer-director of Goodbye, Julia, a really powerful film about Sudan. It's our honor to have you on the series. Mohamed, welcome to the series.
Thank you, Mikey. Thank you for having me.
I wonder how you feel when somebody introduces the film that way, if they say this is about Sudan. I wonder if that feels right to you.
Yeah, I think so. Even when when I'm asked what is the film about, I usually start by saying it's about how Sudan split into two countries, but more from the social perspective. And that's in a nutshell. Before I get in the story of the film, but I think it's about Sudan and how it's splitting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the film is in many ways like a small, intimate story, right? It's like a very intimate story about two people primarily, but it's about so many bigger things. So maybe let's set the scene before we have a broader discussion. So it takes place a few years before this referendum. But people who don't know much about Sudan, I'll give you the floor for a second just to set the stage about why you chose that moment in Sudanese history. And maybe a little bit about the referendum would be useful too.
Yeah. The film starts in 2005, right after the signing of the Nefasha peace treaty, which ended, I think it's the longest civil war in Africa, about 50 years. And this treaty gave the SPLM, or the Sudan People Liberation, or the people of the South in general, it gave them the right to vote for independence or unity after a 6-year transitional period. Sadly, a few months after the signing, the leader of the SPLM, Dr. John Garang, dies in a plane crash. And this sparks a lot of riots in Khartoum and in many cities around Sudan. But the story of the film starts on that day, and in Khartoum in particular, where we are following our protagonist, who is Mona. She's a former singer from the north, who is living in a upper middle class house in Sudan. In Khartoum in particular, and she's in a struggling marriage. And we follow the story through her lens, and in that house. And the film then goes all the way up to 2011, when the referendum happens, and the Southerners choose to secede. And yeah, it ends there. So the question is why I chose to focus on that time. I think it's because it was not only a pivotal time in our history of Sudan. I think it was also a missed chance for the Sudanese to reconcile and to sit and really iron all the past issues, and maybe admit wrongdoings if there were any, and have some sort of a social reconciliation, similar to other nations, like what happened in Rwanda or South Africa or many other countries. Unfortunately, we settled as people. I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about people. We settled for this treaty, and there wasn't any real effort to persuade the Southerners to try to remain united. And rightly so, when the referendum happened, they voted for secession with a whopping 99%, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about that being sort of like the seed of the story. That's that moment where you saw that result, 99% of people saying, we want to split up.
Yes.
Like, how could it possibly be that high. Like if you ask
Yeah,
like 99% of like a soccer team what jersey to wear, they wouldn't agree, right?
exactly. Yeah, and I always and I always talk about this because people make fun of our beloved food in Sudan, and I
Yeah.
because we eat it every day, we love it that much. But if you ask 10 people if they want to have like barbecue or food, you wouldn't find 9 people who would say barbecue. So having 99% of a nation saying no, that's definitely not a political disagreement. It has more to it than that. And I think only someone who is in complete denial would say that there was no racism or that the people of South Sudan were not uh, subjected to unfair treatment. Yes, we lived harmoniously. Yes, not everyone is racist in Sudan, but a significant chunk of Northern Sudanese practice racism and prejudice knowingly or subconsciously, because these things are passed on from generations, and I was one of these people. I think myself always as an example of someone who realized that I had ingrained racism, and I didn't realize it until I saw that percentage, and then I started to question myself and rewind back in my own memory.
Yeah, it's staggering to watch. I mean, for me, somebody, I've never been to Sudan. Watching Muna, the one of the two main characters in that car driving away on her phone, basically in my mind it's like this is like a white lady in the South in America, right? Like driving away from a poor black woman. But these are two Sudanese women, or in this case, the Sudanese man and Sudanese woman. In my mind, I'm like, where does the racism come from? But when you're making this film, I really wonder, are you making this film as a window for the world to see Sudan, or a mirror for Sudanese to see themselves?
As I said, uh, uh, this 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 time of this period of time was a missed chance. Um, but then again, we had another chance, not for the South to come back or for Sudan to get united. I think the South is long gone. It's a sovereign country. It's on now. But to preserve whatever happened, whatever left of Sudan as united, we needed to do this reconciliation. We needed to let go of the privileges of the center versus the periphery, the Arab versus the African. And right now, with what's going on with the war, I think things are starting to change anyway. But before that, when we were making the film, it felt like 2019 or 2018 when the revolution happened. This was another opportunity for the Sudanese to find a new national identity that really brings people together instead of the things that drive it apart.
Yeah. I want to talk about sort of the events since April 15th. So for people who get a chance to watch the film, it's on sort of the festival circuit right now and sort of going around. When people do get a chance to watch the film, it would be easy to think that this film was made in a post-April 15th context. I really wonder how you would have done this film differently. Is it even possible to imagine what this film would have looked like?
I think I would have made the same film. I don't think the war right now changes anything. At the end of the day, this is a part of our history. And it is a very important part of our history. And I always get asked, don't you feel like this racism is kind of fading away with generations? It was worse 20 years ago, and it was even worse 40 years ago. So yes, the newer generation is much better than the old generation, but still, people will wonder in 50 years what happened in Sudan back then. And I think that the film gives it is at the end of the day an artistic piece. It's not a historical document, but it shows you, it gives you some perspective on what happened on the social, from a social perspective that led to that separation. And I think it is important. And as you said, this is not only Sudan relevant. If you take this and look at it through a more universal lens, you see that it is just a call um, for oppression around the world, for people who are holding on to privileges that are unjust, to let go of these privileges and double check themselves as individuals.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about you. So, I'm like preparing for this interview, and I see Mohamed Kordofani spent his career as an aviation engineer.
That's correct.
I really wonder if you feel like that was a something that, if that part of your career, the fact that you didn't study film in a traditional sense and sort of enter this career as a 21-year-old, if you think that's a superpower or you think that's a setback.
I used to think it's a setback, but then until Goodbye Julia got accepted in Cannes.
Yeah.
And right now we're selling in cinemas all around the region. In France, and soon we're coming to Germany and Netherlands and so many other countries. I had a lot of self-doubt on whether I can do this. Right now, I don't think so, but yeah, I think I missed a lot. Not a lot that I'm not able to make films anymore, but a lot to feel like I don't have enough time. And maybe this is also part of why I was able to make this film, because I've always felt like I'm way behind, and I need to work extra. I need to put double the effort and do double the job to catch up. So in a way, it's good. It gives me motivation, but in another way, I always feel like I'm behind and I don't know as much as other people know in the industry.
How did you actually, like, I was watching your short film, Nijkerk, right? How did you even approach prepare yourself to do that? I mean, if I had spoken to you 10 years ago, 2013 or 2008, right? What sort of skills do you have? I mean, how did you even prepare yourself to do this thing? It's not very often. I mean, there are these like iconic stories of like James Cameron and people like this, but how did you do it? I mean,
I was not a cinephile.
Were you like you're a film geek or no?
No, I'm not a film geek at all. I used to watch film just like anybody else. But I wanted to study fine arts when I finished school, and my father wouldn't let me. He thought it's not a job for men. So he said you can do art in your free time, but you have to find a job that pays. And he kind of have a point. If you're in Sudan, you wouldn't pay that much. You do art, at least in that time, with that mentality. But I started writing since I joined college in 2002, and I used to write short stories that nobody reads. I had a loyal fan base of 4. And later I picked up a hobby in photography. And the same camera that I used to use for photography had that video feature. It was a 5mm Mark II, the first DSLR to have that feature on video feature. And it looked stunning. It looked just like film whenever you take video. And I started playing with that with family events, and I later learned editing. But it just hit me at some point that if I make my short stories into film, maybe I'll find more audience than readers. And it took a small filmmaking course online, because back then I was full-time aircraft engineer in Bahrain, just so I understand how to change the structure of a short story into a screenplay, and how to direct actors. And but it was really not that much. I think I learned a lot more in by making the first short film than by this course. Um, but I was still not into cinema in a sense. I just wanted to make my story into a film, but I didn't know anything about this. But then when I made my second short film, it got picked up by Carthage Film Festival, and it actually won the best short Arabic film,
Yeah.
the NASA award. Uh, and they invited me to go to the festival. And when I went, I got introduced to independent cinema for the first time. And it felt like this is when it hit me that I didn't know anything about filmmaking. And I fell in love with Iranian cinema and Eastern European cinema, because until then I only knew Hollywood and Egyptian cinema. These are the two things that I used to watch. And I stopped making films for a while. I just I spent time watching a lot of international cinema, and kind of reverse engineer what I liked and what I didn't like. And every time I get a goosebumps, I pause to see what happened. How did that work? Um, and yeah, I think that's how it happened. But I until that point, I didn't think I would take this as like a full on full time career. It was just a hobby, and I used to enjoy it. So when I started writing Goodbye Julia as a feature film, you cannot really shoot a feature film if you have a full time job. And I started to think about switching careers. Eventually, I did it. I did it when the COVID hit, and all the planes were grounded, and it was like a sign for me, because I was very hesitant, and it was like God saying, "Now what? Just
Yeah.
change careers." But I still don't know if it was the right move or not. We'll see.
It's funny, me and you did the exact same thing, because I switched careers during COVID too to start afikra full time.
Oh, really? What did you do before that?
I was at the time running a consulting firm.
Okay.
Yeah. So also similarly, do the right thing, be the good boy. It's funny though,
you don't seem to regret.
I think the jury is out on yours and out on mine. I think you're doing fine. I'm glad. It's funny, as you're talking now, there are traces of the engineer brain as you're talking. You're like, I would see something, I would pause, and I'd be like, how exactly did this work? It's like you're like an engineer, like undoing the remote control. Like, how is this connected to this, and how is this connected to this? Like, what exactly happened?
If you're an engineer for 16, 17 years, there's no way you can take that out of you. This becomes part of how you think, your mindset, and it's how you look at the world. I'm very problem solving oriented and reverse engineer oriented. I want to know how everything works. That's not just in. I mean, if I just find a toy, or I want to know how it works, and I do the same with films as well. I guess I dissect them, and I try to understand why it's working or why it's not working.
Yeah. It's funny, like I was like watching this film, and then immediately as I'm watching it, I was like, this reminds me of that Iranian filmmaker who made A Separation. This has exactly. And then as you're talking, you're like, I watched all these Iranian films. It's
he must
be a inspiration.
Yeah, he is. He's my favorite filmmaker. Some films I don't like, not all of them, but I really love The Separation. I love Salesman. I love About Helen. And I actually flew all the way to Portugal to attend a master class by him, and I met him there, and we had a chat, and it was like highlight of that year for me. And yeah, I think there's a lot of Asghar Farhadi in my writing. I'm so interested in the way he makes mundane life the thoughts seem interesting on screen, and how he always have this model of good versus good in his screenplay. And this is something I also have in Goodbye Julia. There's no villain character, you know. There's just normal people who make mistakes.
Yeah, there's this relatability to every single choice that isn't quite the right choice.
yes. But I did this in Goodbye Julia for another reason. I think the first step towards reconciliation is understanding why the other party did what they did. If you understand in Goodbye Julia, you don't have to agree to what Mona is doing, or to what Akram is doing, or to what Julia did, but you understand where they're coming from, and then empathy becomes easier if you understand. So
yeah. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but this happens. This is the premise of the whole film. But like the moment Akram shoots Santino, right? And he's talking to Mona about it, and Mona's like beginning to not sure how to explain the situation. And he says to her, why are you making me feel guilty about this? A man was running at me and I was protecting my house, and I would do it again. And as I'm watching that, I'm like, guy's got a point. Like, it's a mistake for sure. And it's like not the right thing to do, but it's also not the wrong thing to do. I can understand it. And I feel like this is filled with that. It's not the right thing, but it's not the wrong thing exactly.
Exactly. I mean, you can argue that, no, like she did. You could have shot him in the leg. You could have shot in the head. But you can also see his point. So, and there's a lot of that in the film where you don't know whose side you take. Or okay, I disagree, but I understand at least. And I think it works quite well in favor of the film that I, as a filmmaker, I'm not being judgmental to my characters. Of course, you can see my voice somewhere, but I'm not siding with characters in the film.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask you about one specific moment and why it was important to highlight this one specific detail. Muna's at the restaurant. She's in a niqab. Okay. Ordering, asking about if there's going to be some band playing, right?
Yeah.
They say there's no band. The waitress says there's no band. She says, okay, thank you very much. She gets in the car.
Yeah.
You could have cut immediately to the next scene.
Yeah.
But you very intentionally take us into the car as she's driving some distance and slowly removing the niqab. And taking her gloves off. You show the gloves on the steering wheel, right?
Yeah.
And slowly you make choices. Okay, you're going to watch her take the glove off and take the veil off and do this transformation that she doesn't even think twice about. She's doing it on autopilot.
Yes.
Why was it so important for us to see that transformation and the sort of autopilot way that she did
it? I wish I could give you a philosophical answer, but there isn't any.
Yeah.
This is just part of why she was not paying attention to the road when the accident happened. And I don't have any like subliminal subtext or anything for that moment. She just takes things off, and there's a moment she hits the kid, she was putting the niqab or the things in the back.
Okay, interesting. For me, I'm like, as I'm watching this, I'm like, there's got to be. This is such an interesting. It's such an interesting choice. Okay, interesting. I I want to talk a little bit about this idea of reconciliation. Were other people also surprised by this 99%?
I know there were a lot of people who were sad, and I'm getting a lot of that now after the film. A lot of people are sending me their own stories of when the Sudan separated. But I think the the result being shocking. This was just me. I don't know why. Like, I don't know if anybody else found that the 99% was shocking. Maybe some people thought it's not an actual thing, like many of the referendum results that we get from around the region, you know. Uh, but actually, that referendum was agreed. It was agreed by a lot of people that it was transparent. Um, I know people were sad, but I don't know if anybody thought about doing anything. It was like it felt like it's over. So there was no point trying to do anything at that point unless you want to make a change.
Yeah. What was the two questions about Cannes? Okay, so your film first of all gets accepted to go to Cannes, right? Yeah. And then it gets recognized for winning this incredibly prestigious award, the Freedom Award. What did it feel like to go for the first time? It's your first feature. You get accepted to go and you win. What did it actually feel like?
The news was getting the news that I was selected in Cannes was a lot more exciting for me than the award. Being in Cannes is very overwhelming. You know, you don't know what is going on. There's a lot of people. The PR wants you, the publicist wants you. You're doing an interview here, you're doing one there, you're meeting this guy, you're invited to this dinner. So there is no time for you to process what is going on. At least for me, being in Cannes for the first time, I was just like, I was running around like a headless chicken. But receiving that email was so. It was one of the best days of my life. I woke up, I just checked my phone. Very bad habits, but that's what I do. I wake up, I check my phone. And usually it's a lot of emails and work, and it gets me anxious for the rest of the day just by doing this. But that day, the first email I checked was, when I opened my inbox, was that email, and I opened it, and it was Christian June saying, "Congratulations, we loved your film. It's selected in Uncertain, which is exactly where I wanted to be." And I remember I didn't call Amjad, the producer, or the actors or anybody. I just switched on the music and I got up and danced for a good 1 hour. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget that day, because there was a lot of problems that happened just before we started shooting, and we were supposed to push the shoot, but we were so keen, we were adamant to shoot in November, the latest, so we can make it to Cannes Film Festival application, the deadline. And we took a lot of risk in order to do that. And when it happened, naturally we were very up, because what are the chances of you getting in Cannes? It's not a very high chance. And when you're like risking, at some point it feels like this is not exactly the best decision to make, to just rush into production to catch the deadline. But if you make it, then it becomes a nice story.
It did, like, so you're describing the feeling of joy, right?
Yes.
Were there any other feelings? I mean, it's a very emotional movie. The idea that to be accepted to be selected to go to Cannes and to be considered for the prizes means that a lot of people are going to see this film. And not only see your work, but also see the story. The story is really powerful. It's really moving. I wonder if there's like other emotions like swirling around.
This is where the joy is coming from. It's not coming from having an emblem on your poster. It's coming from all the repetitions that come from being in Cannes Film Festival. You know that now it's not just the people in your circle that are going to watch the film. The film is going to transcend that. And I honestly didn't know how far can push your film, but it does. Of course, your film needs to be good, but can really help in getting you distribution in France and getting you distribution in Europe and in finding sales agent. Luckily, we already had Matt who was sales agent of the film before we even started shooting. But there's a lot of things that come here, Matt. There's press coverage, there is network, and yes, every filmmaker makes their film with the hope that the film gets watched by the most amount of people. And in my case, I was trying to kind of merge art house with mainstream cinema, not because I love to do that, but because we are in a very tricky situation as Sudanese filmmakers. We don't have an industry in Sudan. There are less than 4 or 3 theaters in Sudan that are working. So you can never generate enough money to cover the cost of making a film in Sudan. So in a way, you need the money to come from outside. But a film like Goodbye Julia is made with an intention of doing some social impact for the people in Sudan. So making that film becomes like a project that you have to study carefully in order to make a film that goes to a prestigious festival so that you can have some sort of international exposure so that then the film can go to other countries. But at the same time, you want to make the film so accessible to your people so that they don't feel alienated, like you're making the film for someone else.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of succeeded in making the film accessible and easy to follow, easy to understand, gripping, with a lot of elements that play with the mainstream audience, like music, like murder, a secret that is covered, and all that lovely hook for audience, and at the same time preserve or create an artistic value within that work that really make the film more important than just an exciting story.
Yeah. What has the reception been among the Sudanese community that you're connected to, whether they live in Sudan or whether they live in Bahrain or wherever? What has been the experience that you felt?
The reception exceeded my expectations. Yes.
Yeah.
I knew that some people will like the film. I didn't think it would become a national sensation the way it has become. Part of that is because of the war, sadly. I have very strange feelings towards the war, and I hate it. I want to stop right away, but in a way, it helped the film. And how the Sudanese people received the film helped us theatrically release in so many countries. There were more than one reasons, but the Sudanese people in Egypt, in particular, when we released the film, they were the reason the film went from. We started with 7 or 8 screens, I think, and it went all the way up to maybe 30 screens because there were no tickets. All the screenings were sold out, and that in turn made it easier for Mad Solution, who are doing amazing work, selling this film and distributing it, to screen the film or release it theatrically in the Gulf. I think this is the first Sudanese film ever to be theatrically released in cinemas, in commercial cinemas. We've always released in cinemas like Aqil with Thing, but not a lot of. I don't think any other Sudanese was
like
released in
Cineplexes
commercial
and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm very grateful for the Sudanese community all over the world, even in our Oscar run in the United States. We didn't have much budget to do screening. So the Sudanese community in most of the Ivy League universities arrange for screenings in their colleges, in their universities. You did one in Harvard, we did one in Yale, in Princeton, in Columbia, I don't remember the names, but I think we had like 19 screenings in total in a span of 1 year. Yes.
You know, it's interesting because the film is a social critique, right? In the end of the day, my first question to you was, is this film about Sudan? But in many ways, it's a film about you. It's autobiographical in many ways. Like it's you're a loosely veiled version of Muna, right?
Yes.
And the initial fear and racism and classism and Islamophobia that she displays, or not Islamophobia, but like religious discrimination that she displays, you are criticizing the nature or the origin of that fear and that thing that separates people. It's hard to feel criticized in many ways as a viewer, right? As a viewer, to sit down and to maybe see yourself as that Muna. It's hard to feel that. Have you gotten pushback at all of people saying, hey, you're overdoing it, it's not that bad, come on, this is ridiculous?
Yes. But until this, I mean, I get that every a lot of people are saying, we are not that bad. You make us seem very racist and all of that. But first of all, there is a representation of a good citizen in the film. That's Merghani, the studio owner, who doesn't show any prejudices towards. On the contrary, he was very kind-hearted towards Julia. So not everyone in the film is racist. But I understand where the criticism is coming from. But luckily enough, I never had to answer to this critiques, because usually you see them on social media. You know, people write posts or they write comments.
Yeah.
And the amount of reverse or replies that they get from other Sudanese people who are saying, no, this was real, this was happening, is enough to show you that at least this was happening.
Yeah.
I don't have to say it. You have other people who are not part of it and saying that this was happening and this was a problem that we needed to address, and we still need to address to this day. And I think that the war made people more accepting to self criticism. We're softer now. War itself showed a lot of our bad side. We're just humans. We're like any other nation. We're not. We tend to try to portray ourselves as the most courageous, the most hospitable, the most generous, and these are rightfully so some of our traits as a nation. But we also have a bad side that we never like that. The war made that very clear for everyone, that some of us are not as nice, some of us are not as kind-hearted, some of us abuse people in their weakest time, as we have seen in a lot of rent prices jacking up in Sudan, extremely, not just by X2 or X3, we're talking X10, X15. And a lot of people are actually abusing the fact that people want to run away, and it's not our best perception of ourselves. So I think, again, war helped people to accept self-criticism.
Yeah. What do you think it has I mean, that prejudice that is at the core of what you're sort of exploring here is definitely stretches across the Arab world, definitely, right? And whether it's imported into Sudan or the history of that is kind of besides the point, but it's definitely something that can be a criticism that can be levied at Lebanese. I'm talking to you, I'm in Beirut. It's very real here. It's real in Cairo. It's real in Saudi. It's real in the UAE. It's real in a lot of different places. And since this is being shown across the region, and since you've been living in a suitcase for many months, you're on the road constantly. You were in Bahrain for a long time. How do you think this sort of lands on those eyes? Do they see the connection? Do they see themselves in the story?
It's funny you asked this because we were just talking about it. I was talking about it with also a Lebanese friend, and I think the film works best. Like there are a lot of people, three kinds of people. One who is not racist, and but they definitely see racism around them, so they understand what the film is about. And there are people like Akram who are racist, and they know they are racist, and they're comfortable being racist, and they watch the film and they're like, "This is stupid. Racism is everywhere in the world, so why are you like making a big deal of it?"
Yeah.
And then there is people in the middle who don't realize that they have racism in them in one way or another, or any kind of prejudice. It doesn't have to be racism. It can be because the film doesn't only talk about racism, it talks about other social injustices and separation in general, not separation of South Sudan, but separation of man and husband, husband and wife, separation of mother and son, separation of children. So the theme in general is separation. And the people in the middle who, like Mona, while watching, they realize that, wait, maybe I need to double check myself. I think that these are the people who get touched by this film the most. And I see a lot of me in them. And maybe that's why the film communicates well with them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another theme throughout the film, which is music, art. And this idea that like art can set you free almost. Yeah. You know, Mona, the character that we've been talking about, is this sort of the singer who has become a closeted singer almost at this point, right? But interestingly enough, the film has no score practically. Mm-hmm. I'm like watching it. I'm a musician. I'm watching. I'm like kind of halfway through, or not halfway through, but 25, 45 minutes into the film, I hear a scored song for the first time. And I was watching with a friend and I was like, I think that's the first I heard music in this film.
Yeah. Yes.
Like I literally said it aloud and like, this might be the first part of any score. Walk me through that justification or that thinking, and this idea that this like art will set you free.
I think art can set you free is, as I said, my own struggle and how I like to see my own path coming in the near future or the far future. But this is how I want to see myself. I want to see that I've done the right decision by switching from aviation to music. But in a way, it does purify people. And I find therapy in film, in filmmaking. I get to know my own self. I've never been the kind who understands themselves, and I understand myself now through writing. I didn't know that I'm writing about myself until maybe draft 4 or draft 5. So in a way, there is something in art that really purifies you and becomes therapy to you. And the other part of the question is, what was it? I lost my train of thought.
The music, the score.
The score, yes. I love realism in cinema. I mean, every time a score plays, sometimes I feel like I can see the film, and it takes me away from that realism. Will be more into the familiar and mainstreamish kind of cinema, which I don't mind. But for this specific film, I wanted to be as realistic as possible. And songs doesn't do that because the songs are coming from the environment of the characters. It's not actually imposed on the film like score. So I wanted to stay away from score, and at some point I didn't want to have any score in the film. But I worked with one person, it was Mazen Khalid, who was the music producer who did the song in the film and did the scores in the film. And this made it easy to experiment, like have a lot of score and then no score at all, and then some score. And because it was also his first feature film experience, he was also open to that idea, as opposed to having like someone who's just for score and then he does all the score and then you don't use it because you change your mind. So that made it easier to experiment with score, because I wasn't sure until I started telling how much score I want to do in this. But I think there's something nice about silence that I find sometimes more interesting than sound. Just the same way I feel about shadow or dark being more interesting than light. And I do this in the film as well. There's a lot of the time you feel like there is more dark than light in the film. And I think that two plays well for Goodbye Julia.
What was your brief to Mazen for the songs that he wrote?
It was actually written in the screenplay for this original song that we did.
So what was it? I mean, what were you trying to achieve?
It said Mona stands with grace and the mic in front of her, and she's singing a song about saying a farewell to an old lover who, despite the relationship not working, she remembers them with sort of a nostalgia and a good will, and she wishes them that they have found happiness in their life. And like there is a breakdown of something that resembles the lyrics thing. And then Imagine gave this task to Mohamed Hamid, who's the poet who wrote the words, and I think maybe the fourth or the fifth attempt was just the lyrics for Bilaya Kef, which is just the song of the final scene.
Amazing. I want to ask you about working with the two main actresses. It's my understanding that both of them, this is their first feature. Tell me how they reacted to the material itself and the story itself.
I think Iman, who played Mona, found a lot of similarities between her and Mona, and that really helped her embody the character. She's not like Mona in so many ways, but she's like her in so many ways as well. And I think she was smart and capable enough of like using only the parts that are similar. It took us a lot of like practice for the shoot to understand the motives, because a lot of what's in the character's head are not said, and it's not even in the script, and you have to do a lot of talk about the backstory and about the motives, about the intention. And this was the fun part, I think, of prep, because we have those discussions after the table read or during the table read about why Mona behaved the way she behaved, or why Akram behaved the way they behaved. And for Siran, who plays Julia's role, um, she can definitely relate because she was raised in Khartoum, and she had this story that she always tells that after the referendum, um, kids threw stones at her, and they told her to go back to her country now that they have voted for separation, and this was very touchy for her at that moment. But at the same time, she had so many beautiful memories and so many friends from North Sudan that she's able to really like fetch emotions that are positive and negative about this issue and relate to it in so many ways. And I think it shows in the film.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, these moments of separation. You know, I grew up in Cyprus when I was a kid. My parents left during the Civil War, Lebanese Civil War, and I spent a lot of my childhood in Cyprus. And you know, Cyprus had a civil war, and there's Northern Cyprus and what people call Turkish Cyprus and Greek Cyprus, right?
Yeah.
But when you live there, they don't really think of it as that way. So many people, Greek Cypriots are from the north, and the Turkish Cypriots are from the south, and they had to move and separate in all these really traumatic, unnatural ways. And when you speak to Cypriots of a certain age, they say, we're not two people. This isn't two people, you know, maybe two different religions, but definitely not two people. Like, we are living together. This would like be like separating people who are right-handed and people who are left-handed.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Is that typically how most of the people on the set felt as they were making this film?
Yeah, I mean, in certain groups, you don't feel any difference. People may. But you can't look at this without looking at the country. There is a long history of slave trade in Sudan. And this is kind of one of many reasons that this racism has been passed on from generation to generation. And then there's also the British colonizer who is another reason for this division. Because not only did they take in the people of Arab descent and give them better education and develop their area, but they also did something called the closed territory law or something, where they separated the north from the south for some of the history and prevented the people from the north from going to the south and vice versa. And this also created this division, and then you have a lot of failures from the political parties that came and ruled Sudan. And you have the wars, 50 years of war between the north and the south. So this is definitely not Cyprus. This is something that has history. And although there are groups of friends who don't suffer from that issue, there are other people who do.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, what are you working on next, and where can people see the film?
I'm writing right now. I'm writing an episode in a series, probably will be on Netflix or Shahid or something. I'm also writing a Bible for a series that I'm working. I'm not working on any film right now. I think I'm going to take a break because I consider films very personal. So they usually take longer time.
Yeah.
So I think for now I'm working more with TV. Where can people watch the film? The film is still in cinemas. This is the 13th or 12th week in Egypt. There are a few theaters that are still playing the film. The film is still showing in GCC, except for Bahrain, I think. But for GCC countries, it's showing. It's month 3 in France, in a few cities around France. And just yesterday, I was reading an article that I think published by Mad that it had good news that the film is coming to Italy, Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, uh, Belgium, Taiwan. There are like many countries that Australia, New Zealand, and hopefully our sales agent in North America, Ambient Light, will secure a distribution deal soon, and you'll have to film in the States again. So the next 6 months, I think the film is going to reach most of, maybe not most, but a lot of countries around the world. And after that, we will be looking at streaming platforms.
Cool. Well, for anyone listening, you probably, hopefully not too badly, but you can probably hear a lot of noise in the background. The reason why that's true is because you've been living in a suitcase for the last a few months. And so you're in a hotel right now. Mohamed, I really appreciate you making the time to do this. I know your schedule is crazy busy. It is an honor having you on the series. And I love the film that you made. It's a really beautiful story.
Thank you, Mikey, and thank you for having me on Afikra. It has become one of my favorite pages. I go back and watch old stuff every now and then. So Amazing. Good luck with Afikra, and hope to keep in touch.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody. If you're listening to this is probably you're listening onto the afikra podcast feed. Also go to the Kawalis, the movie night feed, so you can see all of the rest of the movie night episodes. All right. Thanks so much.